Hey there, Joe Brunsman, insurance broker to the stars, back with another video for you. And today we're going to be talking about the easiest and the cheapest way to lower those breach costs for your business. So let's go ahead and jump into it. All right, a little bit of background here. We are all just data hoarders now. And primarily, I'd say the reason behind that is it's really cheap and it's really easy. So if you go back to 1981, something like $500,000 for a gigabyte of storage. Flash forward to about 2017, it's about 3 cents per gigabyte. And obviously since that time, it's become even cheaper. So effectively, the cost to hold on to data is essentially zero for most people, most businesses, or it's so negligible that we don't even think about it. Now you need to start asking yourself some questions. So the first question would be, what is it do you actually think you have on your system? Next, you need to figure out, what do you actually have on your system? Every single business I've ever spoken to about this particular topic, there's a large discrepancy between what that business owner or what those stakeholders and management actually think is on their system and the reality of what is actually stored on their system. The final question you need to ask yourself is, what do you actually need? What do you legitimately need for business purposes on your system? Is there anything you can get rid of? Is there anything that is in some sort of legacy business process that maybe you can just eliminate that because it's just less data on your system? And if a breach occurs, it's going to lower the cost because maybe, hey, that's just one less person you have to notify. Now, obviously, as I said before, data retention it's just so cheap that people don't even think about it. And once you start going down that path, if you've never done it before and you're just holding on to everything and now you go, okay, we need to fix this issue, that's going to take time. It's going to take money. Obviously, there's institutional friction there. So it's something that you need to think about. So one of the ways I like to talk about this is really kind of delving into those negatives of holding excessive data that maybe businesses haven't thought of. So first off, if you do have a breach or some sort of cyber event, or you think you might have, that's going to cost a lot more in terms of forensics, right? Both in the monetary cost and the time to actually complete that forensics process. That in turn could lead to potentially late notification. If you just have to go through, say, 10x amount of data than you otherwise would have if you would have implemented an appropriate data retention and structure policy, there's a chance that, hey, that forensics isn't necessarily going to be done in time, or you have too many segmentations in your network because of legacy processes and procedures, and it just takes that much longer to get through. Hey, you might end up just having late notifications to clients. That in turn could lead to unnecessary or otherwise unnecessary regulatory fines and penalties. That could be from the state level all the way up to the federal level. And of course, more records equals more costs. So if you're a business and you have data from clients that's like 20 years old and you've got social security numbers that old that's inside of your system, now you're just paying for the notification and you're paying for credit monitoring for people that, hey, maybe your business hasn't even seen for 20 years. Maybe they popped in once, they did business 1 year and they left. And now all of a sudden you're just rationing up that breach cost. Obviously higher numbers of records that require notification, that is going to lead to a higher probability of litigation against your business, something that you definitely want to avoid. Also on top of that, not just higher litigation, now you have to think about, okay, well, that could also get in the news as well. That could lead to prospective customers seeing that information on a quick internet search. And now they're just, hey, hands off. There's a competitor out there that doesn't have this type of information, so I'm not even going to touch that. Things you just don't really want. Next, you have to worry about erosion of your cyber insurance limits, or let's say any other type of insurance you may be trying to rely on following a data breach. So a lot of these are combined limits, or there's an aggregate limit inside of your policy. The last thing you want to do is, now forensics is going to cost more. That's going to erode that limit of liability. Now breach notification letters, that's going to erode that limit of liability. Credit monitoring for clients, that's going to erode that limit of liability. And there are many other associated costs inside of a breach. So the last thing you want to do is wipe out your limits of insurance because you're dealing with a whole bunch of data you shouldn't have had. And now you're going to have to potentially pay out of pocket for a whole lot of other things. Finally, it's, hey, when you have a large breach, there's going to be a higher cost of that breach. That means that your subsequent renewals are going to cost more money. And then, of course, higher ongoing costs and excessive complexity. So when you just have all of these different systems out there operating, you have all this data stored everywhere, just even as your business is operating, even outside of a breach, there's just more time and money that has to be put into that system that frankly, you could be spending that time and money probably better somewhere else. So all of this is really to say you need to think about properly destroying or eliminating unneeded data. Now, why does nobody ever talk about this? Well, I think the reason is it's essentially free for most businesses, or to put it another way, no Silicon Valley tycoon is going to go out and make this, data retention and destruction policy that is going to make them billions of dollars. There's no app for this. And so I think because of that, it kind of just gets swept under the rug. And that's really a pity because there's a lot of benefits to, making sure that your business only has the data it needs. And there's a lot of negatives associated with having excessive amounts of data. Now with this, up until this point, maybe you're thinking, oh, okay, well, this sounds easy. How hard could this be? Tomorrow I'm just going to tell the IT guy, the MSP, just get rid of data that we don't need. Well, it's not really that simple. So here's an example. These are allegations from In the Matter of InfoTrax, a recent case in front of the FTC. So the FTC alleged, these are allegations, that for nearly 2 years, a hacker had gained access to InfoTrax server 17 times. One of the databases accessed was allegedly legacy data that had not been inventoried, and thus InfoTrax did not even know it existed. Now, InfoTrax is a fairly well-known company in its particular vertical. InfoTrax is not run by lightweights. They have backgrounds in computer science. So, this just goes to say that I think this is a problem that every business really needs to tackle. Now, according to the FTC's timeline, InfoTrax was not aware of the breach until the server alert indicated maximum capacity because a disk had run out of space due to the intruder's data archive file. So even then, the allegations here are saying, hey, they didn't even know this data existed. And then by the time they actually figured out that there was an issue, it's because their hard disk had actually run out of space. So not as straightforward as you'd imagine. There's also some potential legal destruction requirements and data retention requirements that every business needs to be aware of. And there's really two classes of these. So there's federal laws, there's state laws. There could also be specific sector laws or industry laws that you would have to comply with. I am obviously not providing legal advice. I'm not providing insurance advice here. But with that, let's just kind of go over two of those. So here in Alabama, now maybe you're not a business in Alabama and you're thinking, why the hell do I even care about Alabama? I'm in New York, for example, or I'm in New Jersey, or I'm in California. Well, remember the breach notification law that applies to you is where your clients are legally residents of. So maybe you have, say, military clients, and they could have residency statuses all over the United States. So maybe Alabama does apply to you. But this is just one example for you. And it says, quote, a covered entity or third-party agent shall take reasonable measures to dispose or arrange for the disposal of records containing sensitive personal identifying information within its custody or control when the records are no longer to be retained pursuant to applicable law, regulations, or business needs. So when your business no longer has a need for that particular data, even if there's no law or regulation there, Alabama is essentially saying, hey, you likely need to get rid of this data. Next, disposal shall include. So remember, this is shall, so this isn't should, it's a shall. This means you have to do it. Shall include shredding, erasing, or otherwise modifying the personal information in the records to make it unreasonable, blah, 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 consistent with industry standards. Now let's go over to a larger state with a obviously much higher population count, and this is New York under the new New York Shield Act. So covered businesses must implement a process that, and this is the relevant part of the statute here, protects against unauthorized access to or use of private information during or after the collection, transportation, and destruction or disposal of the information. So that's saying, hey, you can't just take a bunch of social security numbers and throw them in the trash. That's not going to count. You have to have appropriate means of destroying that information. And 4, disposes of private information within a reasonable amount of time after it is no longer needed for business purposes by erasing electronic media so that the information cannot be read or reconstructed. Now, with this, just remember the term reasonable, that's a legal term. That's not just a colloquialism. That's not the common vernacular that we're using. That's a legal term that you don't want to get on the wrong side of. So if you don't know what that means, if you don't have appropriate legal counsel to advise you on reasonable means, You just need to remember, you probably need to get rid of information as soon as you possibly can. If you don't need that data, you got to get rid of it. Or, Alabama could come after you, the AG there. New York's AG could come after you. Not something you want your business to deal with. This is what I call part of the regulatory investigation death spiral. So the last thing you want to do is you have a breach. There was some issue there. You go through all of that pain, and then all of a sudden an attorney general comes after your business. They start investigating you, and they say, hey, let's see your data retention and destruction policy. And then, hey, maybe you have one, maybe you don't. Maybe you're lucky and you actually do have one and you're watching this video. Well, how do you know that that data retention and destruction policy was actually adhered to appropriately? Now you got another big question mark there. All things you don't want to go down. As I've said before in other videos, don't poke the bear. All right, now let's look at some of the federal requirements here. So these are allegations in the matter of BJ's Wholesale Club. So the FTC alleged that BJ's stored information for longer than was needed for their legitimate business needs. And what was the fallout from that? So 20-year consent order, not something your business wants to participate in, I'll tell you that much. But it was including but not limited to implementation of a comprehensive information security program containing administrative, physical, and technical safeguards, biennial security assessments prepared by a CISP as a GIAC or similarly qualified person, 5-year retention requirement for any documents related to the order, 3-year document retention requirement for all assessments related material, blah, blah, blah. You can just go FTC data security action in an internet search. You can go look, just for any consent order out there in recent memory, and you will just see pages and pages of requirements. Once again, this goes down to don't poke the bear. This is the regulatory investigation death spiral. It's any business could fall into this trap where a breach occurs, you got to deal with that pain, and now all of a sudden you're dealing with regulators and they start poking around, and this is just one extra thing you don't want to deal with on top of increased breach costs, etc., that we've already talked about. All right, so let's kind of jump into some of the takeaways here. First of all, if you're watching this video, it's really incumbent upon you to ask that question. What do we have in our system? Why do we have this information? If you can't get immediate responses to those questions, you really need to start digging into that. Save your business a lot of heartache, a lot of time, and a lot of money by asking that simple question. Next, remember electronic and physical data. So don't just focus on the cyber side. Also think about the physical documents you have. There's plenty of breach notification statutes out there that also include physical documents in their breach notification laws. So don't poke the bear. I've said it, I think 2 times now. That's the 3rd time there. Don't forget about that physical data. Don't forget about, hey, maybe the cleaning staff could come in. Maybe you need a clean desk policy at the end of the day, depending on what you're doing. Maybe you need to lock those records up. Maybe there's a physical security requirement in one of the statutes that you fall under. It's not unreasonable, not unheard of to see that in the state breach notification laws. So keep that in mind. Next, once you kind of have your hands wrapped around this, and most likely I'm going to say you're going to figure out, hey, there's a whole bunch of information that we have that we probably don't need. Well, investigate what those solutions are. I'm not going to get into the technical solutions that are available to you. Your IT or your MSP should be more than willing to either investigate that material or actually provide the answers to you outright. But nonetheless, you need to search out for those solutions. Next, work with a qualified attorney. I cannot cover every single nuance of every law that your business could possibly fall under. And like I said before, I am not your attorney. So make sure that at the bare minimum, you are adhering to the laws and the particular data retention and destruction requirements of those laws. Finally, think about the maintenance. So once you go through this whole system and you ask all the questions, you jump through all the hoops, make sure you have an appropriate data retention and destruction policy. So you need to keep this momentum going. You need to maintain that system moving forward, or you're just going to fall into the same trap that you just tried to eliminate. So don't do that. All right, with that, this is Damage Control Cyber Insurance Compliance. That is where you can download a free copy if you'd like. If you want to support the cause, you can purchase the book on Amazon in both physical and Kindle versions. With that, like, share, comment, and subscribe. Let me know if I missed anything. Warn your friends, keep them out of trouble, lower those breach costs for everybody involved. And with that, stay safe.